Cambridge Analytica is a data analytics company with offices in Washington, New York and London. There are numerous similar firms whose services are retained by political parties during elections around the world. But Cambridge Analytica's approach is different, according to its Eton-educated CEO, Alexander Nix.
Psychographics. That is an understanding of your personality, because it's personality that drives behaviour, and behaviour that obviously influences how you vote.
Cambridge Analytica is a behavioural science and data analytics company that tries to synthesize both psychology and big data and predictive analytics to understand audiences both in the political space and the commercial and brand space, as well as the government space.
Cambridge Analytica was formed in 2013 and is affiliated with a group of companies called SCL. SCL began developing a psychological component to marketing and messaging back in the early 1990s. Their work isn't confined to elections. SCL's website says their services have been used by the US State Department and NATO. This has led some to accuse Cambridge Analytica of using techniques known as PSYOPs, or psychological operations.
This has come out of a background of 30 years of doing psychological operations all around the world. And when people talk about winning hearts and minds in Afghanistan, this is what they're talking about. It's using psychological techniques to change people's thoughts and behaviour.
Scientists have for years been working on models that combine personal data with psychological tests to better understand what messages will likely be effective. In the 1990s, Barry Gunter was one of a number of psychologists hired to help SCL with the science.
Our job, mine and other psychologists, was really to make sure that the science was adhered to properly and that the claims were not too outlandish. And once you've got the software and you've got the methodology which can accurately identify the markers of personality, then it is possible then to target messages at particular individuals who will be unaware of the fact that you've been profiling them, and that indeed you may well be able to find out things about them which they might not be consciously aware of themselves, because they wouldn't think about the information they're providing publicly in that way. So there are very sophisticated systems of analysis which are being developed.
In February last year, Alexander Nix gave a progress update. He wrote in an article that Cambridge Analytica had, and I quote, already helped supercharge Leave.eu's social media campaign, and that the campaign's Facebook page was growing in support to the tune of about 3,000 people every day. Leave.eu was the UKIP-led campaign for Brexit, fronted by Aaron Banks and Nigel Farage. Cambridge Analytica is financially backed by Robert Mercer, an American computer scientist turned hedge fund billionaire. He also backed the alt-right news site Breitbart, which was headed by Steve Bannon, who was also on the board of Cambridge Analytica until he became Donald Trump's campaign director. Robert Mercer was a major contributor to Donald Trump's presidential campaign, which Cambridge Analytica also worked on. It was through this network of mutual acquaintances that Cambridge Analytica met the Leave campaign. At least that's how a spokesman for Leave.eu told it to a reporter from the Observer newspaper.
I went and had a coffee with Andy Wigmore of Leave.eu, and he said it was just because Nigel is a good friend of the Mercers, Robert Mercer, and of course knows Steve Bannon a long time, and they were happy to help. It's all the same family. We were after the same ends.
Cambridge Analytica went on to work for the Trump campaign.
Trump campaigner Jack Posobiec tramps the streets in his Philadelphia suburb. An app on his iPhone is a vital campaign tool. Pins on screen tell him which voters in which houses campaign bosses think might be won to Trump. And at each address, he feeds in live to HQ what people tell him. What Trump's people hear and say on the doorstep is then pushed through the airwaves. And an English firm, Cambridge Analytica, was paid $5 million in September alone to analyse the data for Trump and help refine his messages.
And you know this about every American voter?
That's correct, yes.
Alexander Nix showed me how his firm puts people into groups by psychological characteristics.
So depending on what personality type you have, we can take messaging on a particular policy or issue and then tweak it.
For example, on gun control or the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, there's one message for people scared of burglary.
And that's the picture and the message that you would put on their Facebook page or somewhere like that?
Exactly that.
But for what they call closed, agreeable types, the message is rather different.
The same issue, gun rights. This is about the father that teaches his son to shoot.
But doesn't that illustrate the basic dishonesty of it all? You're hiding this message from that person, you're hiding this message from that person.
Because we are not as divided as our politics suggests.
Data analysis was pioneered in the two triumphant Obama campaigns, which employed lots of clever mathematicians. They even boasted they knew the names of all 69 million people who voted for Obama. One of the brains behind it all was Jim Messina.
We had 12 people on our data team in 2008. We had 165 in 2012. Wow. We ended up using all that data to change the way we dealt with voters. Because in the old days, people were treated like numbers, and I wanted to treat them like individual people and what we knew about them.
A world of leaders more in tune with what citizens think, or a world of politicians desperate for office, micro-targeting people and manipulating them? Take your pick. In Europe, tough privacy laws make some of this kind of data work illegal. And yet many of these techniques pioneered in America were quietly used in last year's general election in Britain and this year's EU referendum.